Because the big thing that I learned out of all the stuff was basically that, in trying to avoid the work, I was also avoiding the learning.
Hey everyone, I'm Jamie and I actually, we're both glad to be here with Mr. Flipping Junkie himself, Danny Johnson.
Hey guys.
How you doing?
Pretty good. It's good to see you guys.
You too. This is actually, it's a treat for both of us because we actually followed you very extensively when we were real part-timers, and we were starting to plan out scaling our business, reading you had the weekly blog going on at the time where you were telling exactly what you were doing, marketing and bandit signs and how many leads, how many deals you closed, and all the crazy stories that happened with those deals. It's which you turned into a book too.
Yeah.
So that's when we first got introduced to you. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a pleasure to interview you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, so I'm used to reaching out to people and looking for people to be on my podcast, on the Flipping Junkie podcast. And so when you reached out, my mind was there. It was like, awesome. I was looking for someone to be on the podcast. And here's Chris saying, hey, we'll be on it. And they said, no, I want to see if you'll be on our podcast. Well, that's cool. All right. Yeah, sure.
We're happy to join you on there again too. So, but yeah, just a brief overview and then you can go a little bit deeper into your background. So you're a software developer turned real estate investor, owner and host of Flipping Junkie podcast, website, blog, all things Flipping Junkie, and got a few different software products and knee deep in flipping houses. Is that about covered?
Yeah, trying to get knee deep in it. No, yeah, it's been an adventure. It's been a lot of different twists and turns, and it's been interesting right now. And I'll go back to getting started and all that for people that don't know. But right now with transitioning back into being active in the house flipping business and in the real estate business, it's I chose an interesting time, the time right now where things are sort of people are okay, it's not going to be business as usual, likely with all the Corona and COVID, all that stuff happening with social distancing and there's been a lot of uncertainty and people talking about all of that. So it's an interesting time to be saying, okay, I want to get back in, when most people are saying, I don't know if I want to, continue buying like I've been buying, or what's got to change. I'm kind of worried that the values might drop or something. It's been really cool and interesting to start at that time, at this time right now with the way it is. And, and I talked about that on the podcast because, there's still a lot of people out there getting started in this business, asking that same question, right? Is this really a good time for me to even bother with this? And if you are already getting started and have done some in the real estate, space, you might be thinking, well, maybe I should, hold out on going full time and trying to make more of this business, not knowing what's going on. So yeah, fascinating time, and we got plenty to talk about today.
So you want to go into a little bit more detail on your background and how you got started and your evolution in this industry?
Yeah, sure. I will start at the beginning. When I was growing up, my father was actually a contractor. He was fixing up houses, and I would help him as an early teenager, cleaning out demos and stuff like that. So we'd be at these houses and fixing them up, and I'd be cleaning all the debris up and just doing, unskilled kind of labor because I was young. And, so he did that for a long time while I was growing up, and he was working for an investor here in town, here in San Antonio, Texas. And as he got older, he started having back trouble, and he started driving a truck. He was actually driving long haul trucking, and he was just miserable. He hated it. And he came back to town, after a long haul trip, and came back and went to the house flipper that he was doing all the remodels for and said, hey, teach me this business. Show me how to do this. And they were kind of good friends as it was. So he was willing to do that. And so my father learned how to flip houses. It was right around 2000. So this was right around 2000. I just graduated college at the same time in 2000 to be a software developer with a computer science degree. And so I'm in this building that's called Corporate Square, which I think is funny and just kind of a funny play on words there with the Corporate Square thing. And it's it was mind numbing, and it sucked the life out of me, really. I would go into work, and it's this locked up room because it was defense contractor work for the Air Force. Mm-hmm. So there was no natural light or anything. And the people I worked with in that room, great people, I love them, but they would play the same CD over and over and over again all day long, just as background noise. And it was driving me nuts.
Office space come true for you.
Yeah, completely. So then, I'd feel I'd leave the office every day and just feel oh man, this is kind of miserable. And then I would talk to my dad and he'd be all excited and just like I'd never seen him before, where he's saying, I'm driving all over town and I got this one under contract and, you know, the numbers are this and just super excited, right? He's just like loving it. He's just having this blast driving around town and then buying properties, making offers and fixing up houses. And I was like, man, I think that's something I want to do. Like, I feel like I love software development, but what I'm doing right now and being in the office all day is just not my thing. And so I'm going to give that a try. And so I started learning how to do it. And, you know, my dad's in a smaller town outside of San Antonio. So his investing was a little bit different than, you know, inside of San Antonio with the smaller towns and the smaller markets. So it wasn't him telling me what to do. It was more of, I'm going to research on my own and find my own path in this business. And when I have questions, I'll reach out to him, which was good because it was, you know, I was finding my way and what I wanted to do in the type of houses I wanted to buy and flip. Mm-hmm. And, you know, his mentor became my mentor. And, you know, I was part-time 3 years. And at that point, I think we were flipping probably, you know, as many as maybe like 10 a year or something like that. Mm-hmm. And it actually took my job firing me to let go of the full-time job. I was just afraid to go full-time. I was like, you know, it's the secure paycheck that I know I'm going to get on this day every single month versus big paychecks, but they're not guaranteed. Right. I still have to work and I have to get the deal. So that consistency scared me. Or the inconsistency. And so it took them firing me probably because I wasn't really working. I was like analyzing deals in the office.
Might have contributed.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, so they fired me and, you know, I remember a manager telling me, I'm going to fight for you to keep you on. And I said, no, don't. This is what I need. This is perfect. Don't try to salvage this for me. I'm ready to move on. And went into full-time investing. And that was 2003, I think, 2004. Actually, maybe even 2006. Yeah, because it was 3 years. So 2006, I think was right at the like heating up of the markets across the country, right? This was the real estate bubble happening. And so that was fun, sort of seeing the values jump like that. You know, in Texas, it wasn't as bad as California and some of the other places, Phoenix, Las Vegas, all that stuff had really big bubbles. We didn't have as big of one. But then, you know, after 2006, 2007 and 8, mainly 2008 was the crashing of that, right? The popping of that bubble. And so I had a couple years of being full-time and knowing that we can consistently get deals, right? And grow that business. And, you know, when the 2008 crash happened, you know, it was weird because the investors I looked up to, you know, that I was like watching, you know, do all this crazy stuff here in San Antonio, you know, all of a sudden we're saying there's no shame in sitting this out. Like there's no, like you might want to consider going to get a job. And that was like, whoa, wait a minute. Like you guys are like awesome investors and you're saying that maybe I should go get a job. Like you guys are going to sit this out. And it was really weird. And I wasn't in a position that they were in at that time where they could do that and just save their money, like sit on their money, right? It was like, I got to keep doing this because I don't want to, I'm not employable anymore. Like I'm just not, like I can't do it. I'm not going to go back and get a job. So I'm just going to keep going, right? Like I'm going to, and luckily Texas wasn't as bad as, you know, California, some of these other places. So we could still offer, you know, like 60% of ARV or something, less repairs and still make out, you know, things were still selling. They were taking longer. And, but really what happened was we had to change our strategy.
Right.
So we changed strategies and really what ended up working out then was getting to owner financing. Because the problem was the banks not lending, right? They were super strict because of this bubble thing. They were concerned about what values of the assets actually were, you know, what the property values were. And so they were, you know, all these regulations and rules about appraisals and all that kind of stuff. Appraisers were, and that was a big problem, right? They weren't appraising high because they didn't want to be seen as the one that was causing, you know, some inflated values that weren't true and stuff. So it was difficult to get appraisals. And so here, what we ended up doing a lot of was buying houses really cheap, fixing them up and then owner financing them. And the cool thing was we could owner finance and there were people buying notes around the country because of the good interest rates. You know, these notes were like 10, 11% what we were selling to people. And we could do a close the same day that we sold the house and owner financing. We could sell the note at a discount to these note buyers. So we cash out right away. And some of those note buyers were paying as much as like, you know, over 90% of the note value. So we were getting what we would normally get on a flip and being able to sell it quicker because it was on owner financing and then still make the money. So it was really cool. And that was one of the strategies like we moved into because of the changes that happened. And so anyway, that worked for several years until the market started rebounding and things were getting strong again. And so that was cool how that all played out. And I think it was about 2010. I felt like we had like ridden like the difficult times and made it through, and we're doing good with the market going up. And I felt like we had it down, like we had it figured out. We had the process of buying houses sort of down, and I needed a new challenge. And so I started learning how to fly, you know, to get my private pilot's license. And that really sucked up all my focus and energy. And I was just like everything was 3 months of nothing but all that info. I couldn't get enough of it, just like when I got into the house flipping business. But as I found out, because I was like, oh man, we got this set up so well that even without doing anything, we still have all these leads coming in. Like we just have these leads from like the direct mail we had done in the past, all that kind of stuff, you know. And because I heard my father saying about that in some of the small towns, like where people just know Frank buys houses, and it's just a common thing in the small town. Like it's saturated, like his brand was saturated, and enough people talked about it. It's like maybe that's happening in San Antonio, and you know, just got a big head and everything. But
because weren't you were like probably one of the bigger investors in San Antonio, right? Would you?
Yeah, somewhat. I mean, bigger people, but yeah, I don't know a lot of people that were doing more than like 50 deals a year, in San Antonio. But but what I found out though, and this is an interesting thing, and I'm sure, I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but basically, you know, I came to realize that the leads that I was getting most of the time were a result of what I did 3 months earlier. Like building up to 3 months earlier, so roughly. And so that was playing out. Like I was doing all the flying lessons and all that stuff, and we were still getting leads because, you know, the work I did 3 months earlier. But then by the time I was done with that and I got my license, like it started drying up. Like I had nothing going on. And I started getting worried. It's like, oh man, I got to do all this work, and I just want to go flying all the time and playing semi-retired. And it's like I needed some way to be held accountable. And I was working with a contractor that had worked with me on our houses on accountability. He wanted to start his own business, and so it's like, let's have accountability meetings. Let's set goals and have accountability. And so I wanted to take that idea to another level, and I wanted to start the blog. So I started Flipping Junkie and say, okay, well, if I'm doing this, it's almost like I'm starting over again, and I want to be held accountable. So I'm going to tell people what I'm doing, because then if people are watching and following and learning, like I can't just stop, right? Like it's just not like I'm going to build this up and go with it. And what I noticed was that at the time, back in 2010, there wasn't a lot of different blogs. Like you basically had two types of blogs. You had the people that were showing their daily rehab stuff. Like they'd say, hey, we're doing the drywall today. Tomorrow we're painting. And they didn't really share the details of how they got that house and what the numbers were. It was more HGTV of just like, you know, the fix up, right? And then you had the other side of the spectrum. The other blogs was, you know, where people were talking about the ins and outs of flipping, right? So here's ARV and here's what this means. But they weren't showing what they were doing. Like they weren't showing the day-to-day or like what they were actually doing. And so that was like the time when I said, man, I think I can pull in the best of both of these and show everybody, you know, what calls are coming in, what happened with each one of the, and this was like really getting into the details, right? It wasn't like high level. It was like getting into every little step of it. And so it was like every call that I got, I would put on the blog for the week, because I would do it once a week, you know, what they were wanting for the house, why they were selling, whether I went in to see the house, and what offer I made on if I bought it. And then on the ones I bought, I would do updates on the stuff we did and what we sold it for and all that kind of stuff. And so it was just like breaking down the day-to-day for everybody and keeping me accountable, because I was showing how many leads I was getting and the goal I had for more leads. And it's really funny because I was just looking at some of the emails from that, you know, where I was showing pictures of those leads, and I was like, that was a pretty pitiful lead to deal ratio that I was getting at that time. Like now that I look at it, because I think it was like I showed 495 leads and then like 11 deal from that. It's like, man, what was I doing?
What's funny is our perspective of that. So I think you were probably done with the blog by the time I even found it. But it was unique. There's nowhere out there that was posting that kind of detail and like a full, like this is what's going on, all these leads. And not only that, how did I even get that lead? You were saying, hey, I put out like 10 bandit signs or whatever, or direct mail, or in any case, like from our perspective, it's like, dude, this guy's killing it. And this is what he's doing. This is what we need to start doing. And I'd like, after work, I'd be telling her, hey, I read this on Danny's blog too. And the other. And
so yeah, I remember doing the bandit signs for a while. But then you just have to learn that. I mean, you're in San Antonio. It's a much smaller market too than Houston. So, and you just have to find what works in your market. And it sounds like, I mean, that's still pretty good. Gotta like
Yeah.
deals.
Yeah, no. I mean, it was fine, but just like what it could be worked up to in finding the efficiencies in the business. Like there I was, going to flying lessons thinking I had already figured out the house flipping game, right?
Right.
And that's like the first way to start declining in anything, is to feel like you've already like made it and you understood all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And the transition from the blogging years and those kinds of things and moving up into developing software for real estate investors and doing all of that and getting into the masterminds with Justin and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We're finding out like all those places that the business could be a lot more efficient, and then working with other investors, all the different ideas everybody has. And it's just really cool to then work on the efficiency of the business and take it to a place where you're getting, turning maybe one of those, or 1 out of every 10 leads into a deal, right? Which I think everybody should strive to at least do that.
Yeah.
And and it depends, right? If you do a ton of direct mail, you might not have as high of ratios because the leads might not be as good as somebody that's searching for you online and finding your website, because they already are looking for someone like you. So the ratios might not be that good everywhere, and it's just different. And it's just finding out what you have and what you're keeping track of how you are doing, though, because it shows you where you can improve. And so looking at those efficiencies in the business and what you can do to make that better is really beneficial right now with the changes that we're experiencing. And I was thinking about this earlier. I mean, it's like we want to talk about like, how are we going to change everything because of what's happening and the uncertainty, who knows what's going to happen, right? Is if the lending dries up and then the markets decline, the house values decline or something like that, what's going to happen to everybody trying to flip houses? And it's kind of funny because it's like all the things that we could possibly do, we should be doing anyway, right?
Yeah. So we're always shifting, pivoting, and like you said, once you think you've got it made and you slack off, like unless you have a phenomenal staff that can run without it, you're going to decline. And maybe that's okay. Maybe you're in a position where you can allow that because you've got so much wealth and assets and cash flow elsewhere. That's fine. But for a lot of us in small businesses, and we've gone through that, you start taking your eye off the ball's going to get dropped.
Right.
And you may not notice.
Well, and then you're actually losing a lot of money or putting money into different avenues that aren't really necessary. And I mean, that's one thing we found out whenever, we had an entire staff, and I know you did, or I don't know if you still do. You've talked about, the past, which that's really cool. I love following your story. And then, so you started flipping, and then you got into software development. And then, so I want you to kind of get into that if you could, and how that went.
Yeah, for sure. So let me see. It was 2015, I think it was. I was working on, I think it was like maybe the third iteration of the software we were using to manage our leads in our own business, in our house flipping business. And I wanted to make one that we could have subscription-based for other real estate investors. And so I started working on that as a web-based solution so that the teams could get on and log in and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know if you even heard about it. Most people haven't really heard about it, but it's REI Mobile. And there's still like a lot of people using it. And I want to shut it down.
Yeah.
There's too many people using it, but we're not letting people get into it anymore. That one, I actually did outsource a lot of the building of it, and it works, but it's just not able to scale because of the way it's built. Like it would really struggle if we put a lot of users in it. But while I was having that built and working on that, I was talking to Brandon Turner on the phone about something, and he had said something about like, why aren't there any websites for real estate investors? Because at that point, I don't think that there were. I don't think that Carrot was, if they existed, I don't think a lot of people knew about them. And I was like, oh, that's a great idea. Yeah. And I get most of my leads from my website, and everybody's been asking me, where do I get a website? I think that's how that came up in the conversation. And I said, I don't have the time or desire to custom build websites for people. Like, this is not my thing. I'm doing well in the real estate investing business. And what I really like about real estate investing, what I want to do more of, is the long-term investments. I want to do more notes. I want to get these payments. I want mailbox money. I want rentals. I want stuff like that.
Right.
And not so much rentals, more of the owner financing stuff. I really wanted more of long term. And so it's like, if I take energy and time away from doing that, it needs to be something that's going to be similar. I want the recurring. I don't want to be a service-based business where I'm on the hook to get paid every time. I want to be able to do something and maybe maintain it and have somebody, support it and then we'll get the monthly payments. And then that way, you know, it makes sense. I'll be willing to do it at that point. And so we were talking, I was like, oh, well, and I started thinking, I think I could build this with an editor so that people can modify their own websites, and I can provide it with a push button setup where they don't have to figure out how to put it all together. And it comes with all the content, all the optimizations and all that stuff. And that became Lead Propeller. I built that in like 3 months, like evenings and weekends. You know, just like coding that up, and then built a team around that. And so with the software, we've had Lead Propeller since end of 2014, 2015. So it's 5 years now. Thousands of customers trusted us and trust us with their websites. So we've done a lot with that. Now the CRM part of it, that one's been a lot of interesting ups and downs with getting that built out, because it's like you could build a huge thing with that. You can do all kinds of stuff with a software system, with automations. And I'm not going to get into all the details, but I basically threw away about $1 million trying to rebuild RAI Mobile. Actually, that was probably close to 2 over the years, because there was a couple iterations that I kind of screwed up. But
wow,
that hurts me just hearing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it was all learning. It was, and I think the big problem that happened with that was this idea of being out of the business, like of not, like we still, you know, at the time, that was when we got into the mastermind, and the conversation was, okay, you have a lot of potential with the software. Why don't you just focus on that? Why are you trying to kill yourself doing the house flipping, running that business, and doing the software at the same time? There's more upside in the software than there is trying to build up, you know, with the flipping and all that kind of stuff, which I don't know is actually true. I mean, I guess it could be kind of true, but we decided at that time, Melissa said, you know, I can run the flipping business and I would like to. So, well, hell, I mean, that makes it easy. Okay, I'm just going to focus on the software then. So that was what, I don't know, what, 3 years ago already?
And this is really one of your biggest shifts that you've done in your business.
And that was hard, like really, really hard to do. You know, especially because I was still maintaining the podcast and still talking to other house flippers, and I knew the business really well. And the reason why I hesitated to ever not be involved in the business while I was building software is because I wanted to be a user of the software, you know, that I'm building.
Right.
And it's like, well, I mean, I know enough about it, so I can pretend to be a user, and then talking with other investors, you know, about how they're using it and getting the feedback, it's still possible. And so we gave that a go. And I think that was a big mistake on my part. I think it was a big mistake. And at the same time, the mistake in that was, you know, a big part of the mastermind. It's still a big part of the masterminds and what people are trying to do. And there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. But the part of it is trying to build yourself, or, you know, build a company so that you can work yourself out of it. Like right now, I think, and like I said, there's a right way to do it, a wrong way to do it. But for me, I think I took that to the extreme, and I made it to be like where I've got to get people in here to take over my responsibilities so I won't have any.
Right.
And that's a horrible thing to do. Like, I think it got me to where I felt like I needed to be out of the business. Like I needed to, like, oh, I've got to work today. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. Well, I'm not running a good company here because I have to do this stuff. And I kind of lost interest in, you know, it all became about the end goal at that point.
Right.
Like, and so, and that became a part of the way I was doing the software too. I was like, I can't be involved in the development. I can't be involved in the day to day, because I need to be more of, you know, high level and removed from it. Like, I just want the numbers every day. I just want the numbers. And that did not work out for me. Like, that's not the way I am, and it's not the way I enjoy working. It took out all of the fun. It took out all the creativity, because the day-to-day is the fun part of it. Like, as soon as we start seeing the day-to-day as not fun, we need to address, you know, that part of us that sees it as not fun, because that's the problem, not that you got to get somebody else in there to do it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. And it covers a big myth in real estate investors, where we all think that we're going to build this, start flipping a whole bunch of houses, get some rentals or owner finance or whatever, and then we're going to live life on a beach somewhere.
Right.
And it's not that you couldn't do that, but
there's a right way and a wrong way, like you said.
There's that. And then also, like, flipping, that's a very active business.
Right.
There's nothing passive about it. It's also a very speculative business. Like, we flip. It's speculation. There's no guarantee. Building a software business, it's not that I mean, maybe on the early stages it could be speculation, because you still have something that you have to prove that users want. But it's still active, very active business. Until you can grow to a point where you're Amazon or whatever, or even smaller variations of that, but it's risky. And it does take the business owner to have their hands, like, I've heard Jeff Bezos knows, like, every single part of his entire company, at least growing as he was growing. Like, he made sure that he knew all of the details because he wanted to fully understand everything that's going on and be able to address problems as they come up. And so as business owners, especially if it's not you and you don't have that leadership skill and background to assemble the team and get the team, the talent to fully take initiative and build things the way that they need to be built, if you don't have that, which we kind of discovered, like, we're not the best managers. So if you don't have that, as you pull away, it gets risky, very risky.
Yeah. But I mean, I can understand that, because that is the end goal, is, you know, to kind of work less, right? And just rake in all that money. But in order to do that, it's kind of having that delayed gratification. It takes, you know, a while to get there. And you always have to have kind of your thumb on your business. I mean, for sure. Because we've gone through that where, you know, we pulled back and we let our staff run the business, and it doesn't work out. And I understand you, because it's like you hear that in masterminds and saying, yeah, you know, you have to hire this person, this person, this person. And then you're great. You're a business, you're a profitable business. But we learn, and as I'm sure you learned, that that's not always the case, because I mean, you really still have to be there, be present. And now, I mean, we've shifted, we've pivoted, because we know now that there's delayed gratification. That's what I call it. There's ways to get there, not always hiring so much staff to kind of do all the work and while you rake in the reward or reap in the rewards, because that doesn't always happen. So there's avenues like that, like building wealth, you know, with rentals and finding different streams of income to bring into your business, and instead of just focusing on one thing. So I can see we've been there too. We understand completely. So I want to see how you shifted from that, where you lost, you know, 2 million, you said, to where you are now. Why didn't you quit? Like I no, this is like, because Chris and I are very different in that way. Because, you know, we've hit so many road bumps, so many obstacles through this business. As you know, there are. Me, I'm like, dude, I want to go find a job. I want to go back to teaching. I want something, you know, that's consistent, like you said earlier. But Chris is the one who's like, no, we just have to pivot. We have to shift. And I love that. I mean, I love that one of us is like that, which then I get on board and I'm like, okay, yeah, you're right. We got to pivot. We got to shift. So I love that you're doing that too.
You guys are different in that respect too, because I'm sure there's times when you bring him into a place and he brings you into a place, and you guys move forward together. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
No, that's a great question. I'm really glad that you asked that question, because I don't. Yeah, it's weird, right? Like, it's like you just don't give up sometimes. You just have that attitude of, I'm not giving up. But then in doing that, I think I discover, you know, like my power, right? I discover the thing that really fires me up, right? And it gets me going. It's like a lot of times, you know, if we've got this problem, you get frustrated and it's like, I don't want to deal with this. But then when you have a problem that forces you to do something, like I find like getting excited and getting interested in, like, oh man, like I'm like, I have to do this.
Yeah.
Right.
This is not just a maybe I don't want to have to deal with this. It's like I have to, like it gets me excited because I've got to like figure something out. I've got to solve this problem. I love solving problems, and I love learning new things. And it actually turns out like there's have you guys heard of Sparketype?
No.
Yeah, so it's was it the Good Life Project or something like that podcast. He has a Sparketypes, and it's like an archetype thing. It's like one of those things that you determine, like sort of like personalities, but it's not personality. It's more of intrinsic, like how you operate and what gives you energy. And, you know, mine came back and said, and most of these tests for me always say kind of like creator, architect, entrepreneur kind of things. And this one was different. This one was interesting, and it's free to take, I think, so it's cool. But this one told me that my main type was Maven, and it was like, that's learning. Like I like to learn. And it said that my second type, the shadow type or whatever, I think it's like shadow type, was creator, which is the thing I usually am in all these other tests. And he said that the thing is, typically you'll do a lot of your shadow type, but not for the sake of itself, but because it allows you to do what your Sparketype. So it's basically saying I'm a creator, but only really so that I can have an opportunity to learn, like learn stuff. which was like, whoa, yeah, I think that's so true. And that's whenever I find myself in these situations, these problems, when I'm just like doing this stuff and feeling like I'm just having to mark stuff off my to-do list all the time. I'm not learning something. I'm not like changing direction. I'm not being more of the visionary but being active in being a visionary. Because we can say, hey, I'm the visionary, and we're gonna, buy some long-term stuff. We're gonna buy some rentals. You guys go do that. But if you're not actively involved in being creative and learning, like what kinds of investments are best for that, like what parts of town, what should the numbers look like, and then being creative on how to get those. Like for me, I wouldn't have fun unless I'm doing that. If I'm not thinking outside the box and trying to figure things out on my own, I'm not going to have fun with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think Justin Williams, which we both know on a podcast he said a long time ago, was, accomplishing the goal, that's great. But the real value is who you have to become to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's essentially what you just said. You like creating things, but you also like learning. And by creating, testing, learning, like it's a constant evolution. And then it seems like you're probably like me in the sense that if you do something long enough, eventually you do get bored and you kind of look at the next thing. Which maybe that's kind of how some of the tech projects really started. But that's not a flaw. It's just how we're wired, and then we always need to be able to change things. But knowing better how to hone those things within a much narrower focus, so that way we can keep making the main business get to where it needs to be and stay where it needs to be, not drop the ball.
Yeah, because the big thing that I learned out of all the stuff was basically that, in trying to avoid the work, I was also avoiding the learning, which is weird. Like it's a weird thing. Like I just got to a weird place of, trying to have like I should have the freedom. Like I've been doing this for years. Like, where's my freedom? I'm working more than I ever did. Like what's wrong? What's happened? And it was like, if I looked at my days though, like it felt like I was working all day, but if I really looked at it, like I maybe worked an hour a day. The rest of it was just like, I don't know. Like I wasn't really being so super productive or, like really working in the business and on the business, like in truth. Like I don't think I was really doing it right. And one of the things I think lately that I've been getting really excited about is really following traction, following the EOS. And, this whole idea of like you can't manage what you don't measure. Right. And so if you don't have, and I had all sorts of excuses for not getting the numbers together for so long, but if you do measure the KPIs, the key performance indicators, and you stay on top of that, like that gives you places to learn and to look and tweak your business and things like that. So doing that has really helped, and getting more involved in what I'm doing. So deciding to jump back into the flipping business, because I did go several years just on the software side. And then, I just recently had the divorce from Melissa, and, that was rough. That was a whole year of like up in the air stuff.
Yeah.
And then I had lunch with my mentor, who was also my father's mentor that I talked about at the beginning of all this. And, he just asked me, he goes, are you going to get back into the house buying business? And I hadn't even really thought about it at all. But as soon as he said that, something inside of me was just like, yeah, I do. I want to do that. Like, that sounds exciting. I want to get back into it. And so I started making plans to do that, right, to get back in. And as soon as I did that, even just like thinking that I'm getting back into this changed the way I saw what I was building software-wise. Because I already, we were talking with, our customers and tweaking Flip Pilot to be the way, our customers want everything. But as soon as I started getting calls again for leads, I found myself going, oh man, I don't want to have to log back in and do this thing. It would be cool if I could just get this notification and handle this with one click off the notification. So it's like all these different ideas for the software, because I'm now using it and like discovering where, I could be much more efficient with my management of my leads and stuff with the software, because I'm actually handling it and in the middle of it. And so I'm excited about that. I'm excited about what that looks like. And then also, just being out and about again and going through parts. I just love driving for dollars. Like I still love that, and like driving these neighborhoods.
Yet to do that.
Yeah, that's one of the things we've never really hasn't been a big part of our marketing plan, but it's definitely very successful. You're not the only person that that has that part of the strategy. Yeah, okay, so you've gone through several shifts, from at least a shift in focus to flying, then having to reboot the whole marketing machine again, to shift towards, software development and tech, to now shift back into flipping houses. And you've done it in a unique time in our market.
Yeah.
So you set out on a Napoleon Hill style quest to ask like the top leaders that you know all across the nation, which, and you posted a little screenshot, and there are a few of them that I know and I look up to. So I figured, and I've done kind of the same thing, but I figured, hey, you went out and interviewed all these people on how to get started, because essentially that's what you're doing. You're restarting a business.
Mm-hmm.
In this market shift, in this pandemic, coronavirus, what should you do to get started? And you had 3 big questions that you posted. And this is available in an ebook that you have on your blog. But I figured it'd be a good opportunity I don't need to go interview all those people. Let's just interview the guy.
Let's just ask Danny who interviewed all the people
that did it. And it's far more effective. So Jamie, what's the first question?
So what is the top 20% of marketing that produces 80% of the results?
What did you find out?
Yeah, what did I find out? So what I found out was it's different for different people, and going off of, and that's probably not what people want to hear. They want to hear, give me the tactic I need to use, right? And I'll throw out the main tactics, of course, but like on top of but ahead of that, I want to stress that I think we lose a lot in looking online and looking for other people to tell us what works.
Mm-hmm.
I think we should get some ideas, right? But then we should go and really figure out what works on our own, because then you can be a little bit more passionate about what you're doing and understand why you're doing what you're doing. Because I think that gets missed, because then you don't really know how to tweak it so much, because you just took what they gave you and tried to run with it. So, take the time to just sit and have, at least I like doing that. I like having fun with like trying to think of stuff that other people aren't doing and doing that. But what the answers were direct mail, still working, always will be working, still works. So direct mail, mainly to the high equity absentee owner type lists, probates. People are still dying. People still need to sell properties. Well, yeah, I should be careful about that one. But
I know, as sad as that sounds, lay it to them straight.
I mean, it's sad, but
true.
It's still true, and it causes problems for the heirs that they have to solve. And really, we're not ambulance chasers when you're doing that. At least you should never come across as that, even though some of them may think that.
And
it's like,
also notes on that too, because we've been called an ambulance chaser before, and that broke my heart, because just watch how you word things on your probate letters. You're talking about direct mail. Don't say, I'm so sorry for your loss. I mean, don't even write that. That's what we've learned in those probate letters. Just
because they know, like, how could you possibly know and feel for me? You don't know me.
Right. You just send a letter just like you're interested in buying their house. That's what we learned, and we got way more of a response rate from that and less angry calls. So
good point. That's a very good point.
All right. Anything else on marketing?
Yeah, the direct mail, obviously. And then, I've heard interesting things about pay-per-click marketing, Google ads. And, I've had some people tell me that they've experienced lower cost per click, lower cost per lead going that route now, because some investors not being as active and not wanting to pick up inventory right now. So they stop some of their marketing. And then I've had other people tell me that it's gotten more expensive. And so I think, again, it's this market situation. Like it's not something that's going to be, hard and fast, like, hey, it's cheaper right now, go do it, because it might not be the case in your market.
Right.
So that was one, though, that's for some people tends to be better. I think Bill Allen had said that, like, he's seeing so much better results with that. So he's doing more and more with that. But again, it takes you testing, measuring, and saying, hey, look, this is working out. Let's do more of it.
Yeah.
And for me, my website was always the thing, right? That was the thing that was doing it for me. And over the last couple of years, I unfortunately let that slide. And so that's my 20% is going in to get my website back up. And I mean, it's up, but I need to get it ranked again. I'm working SEO on it. I'm working to get that to rank. So I'm focusing my time on that, and then hitting the streets. I'm focusing on finding the properties around town that are obviously vacant, and then doing what I can to find the owners, skip tracing, sending the letters, calling, and just hitting the streets. Because I also want, this time around, I say flipping houses, but really I want more of the long-term stuff, because, it became real obvious, with the recent divorce and splitting assets, like most of the assets are the long-term stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh man, like had we just focused on that for longer, wow, it would have been, that's just like most of that wealth was built during the times we did all that. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's what I want to focus on this time around. I'm not as interested in, resale right away. And so that actually plays to my advantage with what's happening if there's uncertainty,
Right.
because I'm buying to hold anyway. I'm buying
Right.
to find a way to make it to where I can, have these and rent them out, which I think, if there is uncertainty in the market, I think people need to buy with that in mind anyway. If they end up having a decline in the market or a problem selling a property, you have to be able to have a separate exit strategy to take care of that.
Yep.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I was going to get into, because that's kind of the changes. What changes are you making due to the coronavirus? I mean, that's what we found ourselves doing as well, is just buying these houses and, we don't know what the market's going to be. We're just buying to hold most of them. And you see that you're doing the same thing because of what's going on.
Not because of what's going on, just because that's what I wanted to do. And it just turns out that it also ended up being something I might need to do.
Simultaneously.
So it's like, but with the uncertainty, that said, though, I have talked to quite a few people recently, and it seems like things are still strong. Like there's really not been, the thing that's been most noticeable, I think, is maybe hard money lenders not lending as being, as open to lending right now. And so I think if you're needing hard money to do some rehabs and flips, you might have some issues getting that as easy as you were before. I'm sure you can still find hard money lenders willing to do it, but they also are smart enough to know, like, hey, if the values go down, I want to have cash. I want to be liquid so I can buy.
Yeah, they're going to be more conservative.
True, yeah.
We've noticed, at least in
With
our
their
area,
long-term lenders too.
Yeah, it's the more long-term wholesale market. Your long-term investor loans, those are almost gone. At least the lower rates, just the investors have pulled out to higher yielding asset sources or investment opportunities. But hard money, short-term, from our experience, is still available, but yeah, they're going to be more conservative, and they should be. But so should we. We should be buying cheaper. Okay. What advice did they give on helping you convert more leads?
That one is, again, it's the same as what we all should be doing anyway. Like this is like making it more important that we do it, but really it's getting like live answering calls, moving fast. And that is like, when you get a lead, you have to know that lead came in right away. So either they called you and you picked up your phone, you didn't let it go to voicemail. And if it's after hours, you have a call center or something that takes the calls, they get forwarded to them or something, but somebody's answering those calls, right? Or you're calling them back immediately if you missed the call. That's super, super important. And it always has been, always will be. The other thing is just having the options available to make it work, so that converting leads to deals was the question. And it's like the efficient ways of making sure that you are capitalizing on each lead, right? If you're letting it slip and you're slow, if they called another investor after you and they picked up your phone, like your chance of getting it is already diminished. So that's number one. After that, it's really just having the ability to know what you're trying to do, and then having those options available, so you're not like sitting on the fence about pulling the trigger on a property.
Yeah. Knowing which, do you need your hammer or your screwdriver?
Yeah. So it's just having that set up and made. So if you're looking at, I might have to rent this, I'm already going to go in knowing what I would rent it for, and then what my payments would be. I have a lender that's willing to do that if it comes down to it, or a way to handle that, and getting all that lined up.
All right. So any final thoughts? And also, how can people get a hold of you if they want to learn more about flipping?
Yeah. So the final thought is just buy low, right? Like right now, in the beginning of this, with there's still active investors, but there are also still there are now a lot of investors that aren't buying either. And so I think the competition has gone down somewhat. And I think, making it a point to buy lower now, to try to buy lower right now, and not being tempted to go above like what you decide is like your safe buying threshold.
Yeah.
And, if you're finding yourself wanting and tempting to do that or needing to do that, then you just need more leads. All right. Because you will be able to buy cheaper. With that said, sellers might be a little bit longer in accepting that, that they might need to take less. And so follow-up has become even more important. And, I'm sure you guys have heard it being in the groups that we've been in and everything, but, there's some investors like 40-50% of the deals they get are from follow-up. So if they didn't do the follow-up, they would have half the amount of deals that they do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
So follow. So having a way to do that. And, that's what our software is all about, the Flip Pilot stuff. That's why we're working on it. That's why I love that so much. It makes it to where it's consistent without you killing yourself having to do it all, the automations and stuff. So
Yeah.
doing that now, finding me, if you're interested in those questions and the 8 people that answered those questions that I reached out to, on my blog, you can go to flippingjunkie.com/pandemic, PANDEMIC. So flippingjunkie.com/pandemic. And you can find me on the blog. There's a contact form if you want to reach out to me, or just, Danny@flippingjunkie.com is an email address. Yeah. Junkie is JUNKIE. And if I went through and listed all the things that I have, it would take us an hour. So
That's all.
the blog is really
Check it out.
That's a good place to start.
Yeah.
All right, Danny, it's been a pleasure. Appreciate the humility, because that's rare in this industry. Everyone wants to say, "Hey, look at me, and I'm great, and I'm making all this money." But throughout your career, you've been very open, humble. We appreciate it. It's one reason why we've kind of followed you, and
that's what we started too with rehacking. We kind of are showing that it's not always easy. We're showing, the bumps in the road that you may come across. And one final thought is, don't quit, don't stop, just
quit.
Pivot and shift. That's like our motto. When the going gets rough, pivot.
That's who survives, right? You don't hold on to this belief that this is the way it's supposed to operate, and oh man, things are changing and I can't change.
Exactly.
So that's
May
awesome
I
that you guys
also add one more thing? What is it with every entrepreneur, real estate investor I know? Pilots. They're all pilots. They all want these planes. I mean, we have a picture up right now because that's one of Chris's goals, is to buy a plane too. And he's a pilot as well. It's
I haven't flown forever.
Every single real estate investor I know, odds are they're a pilot. So there's something about that.
I have no idea.
Yeah, it's really
just one of those challenges, right?
Yeah.
It's just like one of those things, I want to see if I can do that.
Yeah.
For me, at least, that was what it was.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what it takes. So if you're a pilot, that's where,
we could probably do another podcast.
You're going to be, with all the pilots, these are successful people. So get a pilot's license too. It sounds like that's what you need.
If you're a pilot, you might be a real estate investor.
Yes.
Yeah. Maybe did you have a vision board with that kind of stuff on it? Did you ever do the vision board thing?
Oh yeah, we have it right here.
Yeah. I don't know.
Put that on there?
It's on there. We need to update it since we've recently.
There's his plane right there.
Oh, cool.
His airplane.
Yeah, the Y.
Yeah.
We do need to update it.
My wallpaper is it's a King Air, so. Or no, I have a Cessna, one of the twin turbine engine jet.
Oh, nice.
So, all right. Hey, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, same. Y'all take care.